Have you ever wondered why the people closest to you suddenly turned cold? Why did friends become strangers? Why did family members start treating you like an enemy? Here's the psychological truth that will transform how you see every relationship in your life. And by the end of this exploration, you'll understand the hidden war that's been raging around you, a war you never even knew you were fighting. Carl Jung, one of history's most brilliant psychologists, discovered something profound about human nature, something that explains why your personal growth becomes a threat to others, something that reveals why healing yourself triggers attacks from those who should support you most. Jung said that most people will do anything to avoid confronting their own shadow, the parts of themselves they refuse to acknowledge. And when you start healing, when you start growing, you become something dangerous. You become a living mirror that forces everyone around you to see exactly what they're avoiding. But here's what Jung observed that will shock you about why people really hate your transformation. According to Jung, the moment you stop playing the role others assigned you, you trigger what he called projection. They start projecting their own unhealed wounds, their own stagnation, their own fear of change directly onto you. Think about this for a moment. You're not being hated for who you've become. You're being hated for who they've refused to become. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But most people aren't ready for that level of self-awareness. So instead of looking inward, they attack outward. They attack you. This isn't random. This isn't a coincidence. This is human psychology at its most predictable and its most brutal. Here's the part that will make everything click about your relationships. Carl Jung discovered that every person carries a shadow self, the collection of traits, emotions, and aspects of personality that they've rejected or denied. When you start setting boundaries, when you stop people-pleasing, when you refuse to shrink yourself, you're essentially integrating your shadow. You're becoming whole. But for people who are still running from their shadow, your wholeness becomes unbearable to witness. Jung observed that we despise in others what we haven't accepted in ourselves. Your confidence reminds them of their insecurity. Your boundaries remind them of their inability to say no. Your peace reminds them of their internal chaos. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Wait until you hear what Jung said about why your family and closest friends are often the first to turn against you. According to Carl Jung, there's a psychological process called individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the expectations and projections of others. Jung said this process is essential for psychological health, but it's also deeply threatening to the people around you. Why? Because your individuation forces them to confront their own lack of authentic self. When you stop being who they needed you to be and start being who you actually are, it shatters the illusion they built their identity around. They don't hate the real you. They hate that the real you exists at all, because it proves they've been living a lie. This is why the people who claim to love you most become your harshest critics. This is why family dinners become battlefields. This is why old friends suddenly can't stand being around you. Here's where Jung's most revolutionary discovery explains why entire groups turn against you. Carl Jung said that we're all connected through what he called the collective unconscious, shared patterns of behavior and belief systems that keep societies functioning. But these same systems depend on conformity, on people staying in their assigned roles, on maintaining the status quo. When you break free from these collective patterns, when you refuse to participate in generational trauma, when you stop enabling dysfunctional family dynamics, you're not just changing yourself, you're threatening the entire system. Jung observed that the collective unconscious will mobilize to bring the deviant back in line. That's why it feels like everyone turned against you at once. It's not your imagination. It's the system protecting itself. Here's what Jung discovered about why people say you've changed like it's a crime. According to Carl Jung, we all wear masks. He called them personas, to navigate social situations. But most people mistake their persona for their true self. They become so identified with the mask that they forget there's a real person underneath. When you outgrow your persona, when you stop performing the character others expected, it feels like death to them. Not your death, the death of their projection. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." They're not ready for that terror, so they blame you for triggering it. This is why your growth feels like abandonment to them. This is why your healing feels like betrayal. You're not just changing, you're destroying the fantasy they needed you to maintain. Here's Jung's insight that will explain why your growth makes people so uncomfortable. Carl Jung discovered that we all have both masculine and feminine psychological traits, what he called the anima and animus. But society often forces us to suppress one side. When you start integrating both aspects of your psyche, when you become both compassionate and strong, both nurturing and assertive, it threatens people who are still splitting these qualities. Your wholeness makes their fragmentation obvious. Jung observed that people will attack the very qualities in you that they've forbidden in themselves. The woman who embraces her assertiveness gets called aggressive. The man who shows vulnerability gets called weak. The person who sets boundaries gets called selfish. But wait until you understand what Jung called the transcendent function, and why it makes you dangerous to the status quo. According to Carl Jung, psychological growth happens through the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing forces in tension until a new level of consciousness emerges. When you can be both loving and boundaried, both empathetic and detached, both open and selective, you've accessed something most people can't comprehend. This transcendent consciousness is exactly what threatens others. You're no longer predictable because you're no longer operating from unconscious patterns. You've transcended the either-or thinking that keeps most people trapped. And that level of psychological freedom is terrifying to those still caught in binary thinking. They need you to be either good or bad, either submissive or rebellious, either with them or against them. Your nuanced, integrated approach to life breaks their cognitive framework. Here's what Carl Jung said that will change how you see every person who turned against you. Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he also warned that this privilege comes with a price. The loss of everyone who is only attached to your false self. The people who hate you now aren't responding to who you've become. They're responding to who they've refused to become. Your healing journey is forcing them to confront their own psychological stagnation, and instead of using that as motivation to grow, they're using it as justification to attack. This is the silent war you never see coming. It's not about your actions. It's about what your actions represent. It's about the mirror you hold up to their unhealed wounds. According to Carl Jung, individuation, becoming your authentic self, is not just a personal journey. It's a spiritual and psychological imperative. And the hatred you're experiencing isn't evidence that you're on the wrong path. It's confirmation that you're on the only path that matters, the path back to yourself. Jung said, Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. You've torn down those barriers. You've integrated your shadow. You've transcended their projections. And that, according to the greatest psychologist who ever lived, is exactly why they can't stand you anymore. The question isn't why they hate you. The question is, are you strong enough to keep growing despite their hatred? Because according to Carl Jung, your psychological evolution depends on it. Every person who turns against your growth is showing you exactly what they're running from. Every attack is a confession of their own inner war. Every criticism is a projection of their own self-hatred. You have two choices. You can shrink back into the role they assigned you, sacrifice your authenticity for their comfort, and live the rest of your life as a fragment of who you could have been. Or you can continue the journey of individuation, knowing that the price of becoming whole is the loss of everyone who preferred you broken. Once you understand this psychological dynamic, something profound shifts. You stop taking their hatred personally. You stop trying to convince them of your worth. You stop fighting a war that was never about you in the first place. Their rejection becomes evidence of your growth. Their discomfort becomes proof of your healing. Their attacks become confirmation that you're on the right path. This is the liberation that comes with understanding Jung's insights. This is the freedom that comes with seeing the invisible war that's been raging around you. The people who matter, who are also on their own journey of individuation, will recognize and celebrate your growth. They'll see your boundaries as healthy, your authenticity as inspiring, your wholeness as a gift to the world. But those who are still trapped in their unconscious patterns, still running from their shadow, still projecting their wounds onto others, they'll continue to hate you for the simple crime of becoming who you truly are. And that, according to Carl Jung, is not your problem to solve. It's theirs. Your task is to continue growing, continue healing, continue becoming. Your task is to hold the tension of being both loving and boundaried, both compassionate and strong, both open and discerning. Your task is to become the person you were meant to be, regardless of who that threatens, regardless of who that triggers, regardless of who that leaves behind. Because in the end, the greatest gift you can give to the world is not your comfort with others' dysfunction. It's your commitment to your own psychological evolution. This is why people suddenly start hating you. This is the silent war you never see coming. And this is why, despite everything, you must continue on the path of becoming who you truly are. The hatred you face isn't evidence of your failure. It's evidence of your success. It's evidence that you're no longer willing to live a lie for the comfort of others. It's evidence that you've chosen the courage of authenticity over the safety of conformity. And that choice, according to Carl Jung, is the most important choice you'll ever make. So the next time someone turns against you for your growth, remember, they're not responding to who you've become. They're responding to who they've refused to become. And that's not your burden to carry. Your burden is to continue growing, continue healing, continue becoming. Your burden is to be the person you were meant to be, regardless of who that threatens. Because your psychological evolution isn't just about you. It's about breaking the chains of unconscious patterns that have been passed down through generations. It's about being the one who says, "This dysfunction stops with me." And that, according to the greatest psychologist who ever lived, is exactly why they can't stand you anymore. Thank you for staying with me through this exploration of Jung's profound insights. If this resonated with you, if this helped you understand the psychological dynamics at play in your relationships, remember that this knowledge is power. The power to stop taking their hatred personally, the power to continue your journey of individuation, the power to become who you truly are, regardless of who that threatens. If these words touched something deep within you, leave a comment, because someone out there might need to know they're not alone. Share this video with someone who's stepping out of old roles and returning to their true self. Hit like if you've ever been misunderstood just for having the courage to change. And don't forget to subscribe. This is where we walk through the shadows, to live in the light of who we truly are.